Names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by firstly looking at the literal meanings of the names of Allah Azza wa Jal. For example, one of His names is Ar-Razzaq, one of His names is Al-Qawi, one of His names is Al-Alim. I come forth and I look at these words from an Arabic perspective to see the literal meaning of Alim, the literal meaning of Qawi, the literal meaning of Razzaq, so on and so forth. So firstly, a person should look at the literal meanings of his names and then obviously should connect those meanings with the Quranic verses and the words of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal as-salatu was-salam to properly understand the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ultimately, these names help us understand God. Obviously, a person will not get to a level in which he will fully comprehend Allah Azza wa Jal or understand Him, because that is impossible. It is impossible for the creation to fully comprehend or understand the Creator. But we can enhance our understanding by looking at the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus you realize that Al-Quran Al-Kareem in many verses mentions what? Mentions the names of God. Many verses in the Quran are concluded and with names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In many cases, Allah will mention two of His names. And you'll realize that there's a connection between the names mentioned in a specific verse and the content of that verse. One of the interesting names of God, and all of His names are interesting, is Al-Qahir and Al-Qahhar. What is the meaning of Al-Qahir? If we understand the meaning of Al-Qahir, we'll understand the meaning of Al-Qahhar. Because Al-Qahir is one who performs what we call Qahr. And Al-Qahhar is one who performs Qahr in abundance. So what is the meaning of Qahr? Qahr means ghalaba. It means to defeat something. When someone defeats someone else, you say, Qahara fulanun fulana. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is known as Al-Qahir and Al-Qahhar because He is the one who defeats all, yet He is never defeated. Allah Jalla Jalaluh defeats all beings, yet no one can defeat Him. In other words, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supreme. And when the will of a particular creation or particular creations clashes with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which will prevails? The will of Allah. No one can defeat Allah's will. When Allah wants something to happen, it will happen. And when He wants something, when He wishes or wills that something does not take place, whatever people do, they will not be able to bring that thing into being. They will not be able to perform that thing which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want to take place. Here, we can present many examples, but with the limited time we have, I'll mention one example pertaining to Musa alayhi salam. Musa, which Musa? Today we're commemorating the martyrdom anniversary of Moussa Al-Kathim alayhi salam. I want to start off with an example pertaining to Nabiullah Musa, Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Musa, as many of you know, was wanted. Pharaoh wanted to kill him. Why? Because Banu Israel were speaking amongst themselves about the emergence of a man who will be Israeli, meaning a man from Banu Israel, whose name will be Musa, son of Imran, alayhim as-salam. They had news from previous prophets, alayhim as-salam, that one of them, a man called Musa ibn Imran, who will come from Banu Israel, will save Banu Israel from the oppression of Pharaoh and will ultimately destroy Pharaoh. So this piece of information was transported to Pharaoh. When Pharaoh knew about this, he wanted to kill Musa salamullahi alayhi, to catch Musa ibn Imran and to kill him before he grows up, before he becomes an adult and ultimately finishes Pharaoh. And so he commanded his troops to do what? To slaughter the babies, the male children of Banu Israel. Hence, the male children of Banu Israel were slaughtered. They were slaughtered. Musa alayhi salam, Pharaoh's will was to do what? Was to get rid of Musa. Before Musa salamullah alayhi grows up and finishes him. That was his plan. But Allah had a different plan. And Allah's plan prevails. Pharaoh had a will, Allah had a will, but Allah's will always prevails. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah azza wa jal decreed that Musa salamullah alayhi will come into this world. And when he came into this world, Allah inspired his mother to cast him in the river of Nile, when she fears for his life. And so she did so. She was inspired by God. Allah brought down upon her what we call ilham. And so when she feared for his life, she placed Musa in a box and she placed him in the river, in the Nile River, Nahr al-Nil. The river took him where? It took him to the arch enemy. It took him to Pharaoh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took Musa alayhi salam to the palace of Pharaoh. Asya bint Muzahim, salamullahi alayha, this noble lady who had never disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, caught Musa. She brought him to Pharaoh, and when Pharaoh wanted to kill him, she stopped him. So Allah preserved Musa's life through, He protected Musa's life through Asya alayha as-salam. Then Musa began dwelling where? In the palace of his enemy, in the palace of Pharaoh. And he began growing up. Imagine, Pharaoh wanted to get rid of Musa alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling Pharaoh, it was as if Allah told Pharaoh, you wanted to get rid of Musa, and I have decreed that Musa alayhi salam will live in your own palace. He will be beside you. He'll grow up, and once he grows up, he will put an end to your tyranny. This story in itself is a great manifestation of the names Al-Qahir and Al-Qahhar. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills for something to happen, it happens. And no one can change that. No one can stop Allah's will or Allah's plan from taking place. This, my brothers and sisters, is an important story because it answers a question which might come to mind pertaining to Sahib al-Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif. We're told by Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam in many traditions that Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallahu farajah will fill the earth with justice and equity, just as it will be filled with injustice and inequity. Someone might say, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam will have many enemies, will have a significant amount of enemies. Will he actually be able to accomplish his goal? when it's a given that many people or a significant amount of people who will have some sort of power will try to stop him? And the answer is yes. The Imam will accomplish his goal. Why? Because he's backed, he's supported by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah Azza wa Jal, when Allah wants something to happen, it happens. Allah will support the Imam such that he will fill the earth. He'll fill it with justice and equity. Meaning every corner on the globe will be overwhelmed with the justice and the equity of Sahib al-Zaman, salawatullahi wa salamu alayh, just as it will be filled with injustice and inequity. Allah's will is supreme. Hence, one day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds Dawood alayhi salam about this reality, of this reality. In reality, he's reminding us, but he uses Dawood alayhi salam as a medium. In better terms, Allah ta'ala reminds Dawood, but he reminds humanity of this reality through his dialogue with Dawood. What does Allah tell Dawood? I want you to listen carefully to the following tradition, which you can find in the book At-Tawheed for Sheikh al-Saduq rahimahullah. Sheikh al-Saduq narrates that Imam Ali, he says that Imam Ali is narrated to have said alayhi salam, أوحى الله عز وجل إلى داود عليه السلام. He says that one day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a message to who? To Dawood. He told him, Ya Dawood, turidu wa urid. Remember, Allah Azza wa Jal is addressing Dawood, but He's using him as a medium to address us, to convey the message to us. So here it's as if Allah is speaking to the human being. He says, Ya Dawood, O Dawood, turidu wa urid. You have a will, and I have a will. Sometimes our will clashes with what? With Allah's will. So what happens? Allah says, He says, وَلَا يَكُونُوا إِلَّا مَا أُرِيد. However, only what I will, only what I want takes place. فَإِنْ أَسْلَمْتَ لِمَا أُرِيد أَعْطَيْتُكَ مَا تُرِيد. So if you submit to what I want, to what I will grant you what you want. وَإِنْ لَمْ تُسْلِمْ لِمَا أُرِيد. But if you do not submit to what I want, أَتْعَبْتُكَ فِي مَا تُرِيد. I will afflict you with tiredness as you're trying to achieve what you want. ثُمَّ لَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا مَا أُرِيد. And at the end of the day, only what I want will take place. This tradition, this short yet deep tradition, reminds us of several points. Number one, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not permit the human being to perform a particular deed, the human being will not be able to perform it. If Allah does not permit for something to happen, that thing will not happen. For example, in the story of Imam Al-Askari and Narjis's marriage, salamullahi alayhima. Narjis, salamullahi alayha, the mother of Imam Al-Mahdi, her family wanted to marry her to her cousin. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed that this lady will be the mother of who? Baqiyatullah, Ajjalallah faraja. She will be the mother of Sahib al-Zaman. Hence, whenever that marital ceremony was about to take place, something would happen and the ceremony would be cancelled. Allah would not allow that man who was Narjis's cousin to marry her because she was destined to be the mother of Sahib al-Zaman, Ajjalallah ta'ala farajahu sharif. She was the she was destined to be the wife of Al-Imam Al-Askari alayhi salat wassalam, not the wife of that individual, the cousin of Narjis salamullahi alayha. So the narration regarding Dawood alayhi salam, the narration reminds us that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not permit the human being to perform a particular deed, he will not be able to perform it. But bear in mind, I've said this once and I'll say it again. You need to keep in mind that there's a difference between what Allah permits and what pleases Allah. Allah Azza wa Jal will permit people to do indecencies, but it doesn't mean that them doing indecencies pleases Him. Allah permits people to disbelieve. Does He want them to disbelieve? No, He doesn't. He wants them to believe. So there's a difference between idhnillah, what Allah permits, and rida Allah, what pleases Allah. Thus you find that Al-Imam Al-Hussain alayhi salam, on the day of Ashura, one of the first words he said on that heartbreaking day was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given permission that I and you be killed today. He was addressing his companions. He told them, Allah Azza wa Jal has given permission that we get killed on this day, meaning the day of Ashura. Does that mean Allah was pleased with the oppression that befell Aba Abdullah? Obviously not. So there's a difference between what He permits, what He allows, and what pleases Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. The narration we narrated regarding Dawood alayhi salam is a deep narration. And you can extract multiple ideas or multiple points from the narration. Let me share one more point before we continue with our topic. Allah tells Dawood alayhi salam, He tells him what? He tells him, فَإِنْ أَسْلَمْتَ لِمَا أُرِيدْ أَعْطَيْتُكَ مَا تُرِيدْ. If you submit to what I want, I will give you what you want. The question is, what do people want? Is there one thing that every human being strives for? Yes. Believe it or not, there's one thing that every human being, whether he's a believer or not, whether he's a Muslim or not, strives for. And that thing is happiness. Every human strives to attain happiness. And every human would like to dwell in a state of constant luxury, constant relaxation, constant peace. But Allah Azza wa Jal has created this world in a way such that it is impossible. It's what? It's impossible to reach a state of constant peace or constant relaxation so long that you are in ad-dunya. Especially if you're what? Especially if you're a believer. Everyone in this world, especially believers, goes through some sort of discomfort. Even if you're what? Even if you're a trillionaire, even if you own thousands of businesses, for example, even if you have extreme fame and extreme popularity, you will go through what? Through discomfort. You will go through certain types of pain, even if those types of pain are emotional pain, forms of emotional pain. SubhanAllah, Allah created the world in a way such that you have to feel some sort of discomfort when you dwell in a dunya, especially if you're what? If you're a mu'min, if you're a believer. But Allah tells Dawood, if you submit to what I want, I will give you what you want. Meaning, if the human being submits to Allah's commands, he actually follows the book of God, he follows the commands of Allah, what will happen? Allah will lead him to a world that is absolutely free of discomfort, absolutely free from any form of discomfort or displeasure or anxiety or depression and the likes. Allah will lead him to Jannah. And Jannah is the abode of peace. That is where you'll find absolute relaxation. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Absolute relaxation. Absolute luxury. Absolute happiness. So Allah tells you, you as a human being, you strive towards that. If you want to attain it, submit to what I want, meaning to what Allah wants, subhanahu wa ta'ala. The sad reality is what, my brothers and sisters? The sad reality is many people, or most people, do not submit to God. And if we look at the stories of mankind, the stories of the prophets ﷺ and their civilizations, we realize that the whole battle between truth and falsehood can be summarized in these words. The battle or the war between truth and falsehood is summarized in the following words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala